Strike the bell, second mate, let us go below. Look a-well to windward, you can see it's going to blow. Look at the glass, you can see that it has fell. We wish that you would hurry up and stir right the bell. So goes the chorus of the pumping shanty, Strike the Bell. In this venerable old sea song, the narrator can sense foul weather approaching, and is urging the officer of the watch, in this case the second mate, to strike the ship's bell, allowing him and his fellow watchstanders to go below for some much-needed rest. Now, to understand this song, you must know something of the bell and watch system by which time is kept aboard ships. At sea, you understand, we do not use the shore-going method of calling 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and so on. Instead, we strike the ship's bell for every half-hour elapsed. Richard Henry Dana Jr. explains the system better than I in The Seaman's Friend. The time at sea is marked by bells. At noon, 8 bells are struck. That is, 8 strokes are made upon the bell. And from that time it is struck every half hour throughout the 24, beginning at 1 stroke and going as high as 8, adding 1 after each half hour. For instance, 12 o'clock is 8 bells, 12:30 is 1 bell, 1 o'clock is 2 bells, 1:30 3 bells, and so on until 4 o'clock, which will be 8 bells again. The watch is then out, and for 4:30 you strike 1 bell again. A watch of 4 hours, therefore, runs out the bells. It will be observed also that even bells come at the full hours, and the odd bells at the half hours. For instance, 8 bells is always 12, 4, or 8 o'clock, and 7 bells is always 3:30, 7:30, or 11:30. Now, this system may at first seem complicated to the landsman, but there is a very simple reason for its existence. On ships, work is divided between 2 groups of sailors. These groups are called watches, generally port and starboard, and they work in 4-hour shifts, or 1 cycle of 8 bells. What this means in practice is that any given sailor will work for 4 hours and then have the next 4 hours off. After 4 hours off, he is back to work for another 4, and so on around the clock, never getting the opportunity to sleep the whole night through. During his time in the U.S. Navy, Herman Melville found this system to be most inhumane, and even went so far as to blame chronic sleep deprivation for the early deaths of many of his shipmates. In a chapter of White Jacket entitled "One Reason Why Man-of-War's Men Are Generally Short-Lived," he had this to say. In a man-of-war at sea, the sailors have watch and watch. That is, through every 24 hours, they are on and off duty every 4 hours. Now, the hammocks are piped down from the nettings, the open spaces for stowing them running around the top of the bulwarks, a little after sunset, and piped up again when the forenoon watch is called at 8 o'clock in the morning, so that, during the daytime, they are inaccessible as pallets. This would be all well enough did the sailors have a complete night's rest, but every other night at sea, one watch will have only 4 hours in their hammocks. Indeed, deducting the time allowed for the other watch to turn out, for yourself to arrange your hammock, get into it, and fairly get to sleep, it may be said that every other night you have but 3 hours sleep in your hammock. Having then been on deck for twice 4 hours, at 8 o'clock in the morning, your watch below comes round, and you are not liable for duty until noon. Under like circumstances, a merchant seaman goes to his bunk, and has the benefit of a good long sleep. But in a man-of-war, you can do no such thing. Your hammock is neatly stowed in the nettings, and there it must remain until nightfall. Melville hated the watch system so much that he even petitioned Congress to act, stating, "It is concerning such things as the subject of this chapter that special enactments of Congress are demanded. Health and comfort, so far as duly attainable under the circumstances, should be legally guaranteed to the man-of-war's men and not left to the discretion or caprice of his commander." Now, there is one final peculiarity of the watch system that I feel I should mention, and that is the implementation of so-called dog watches. I will let Stan Hugel, a sailor and sea historian, often called the last working shantyman, explain. In British ships, thanks to the mutiny of the Nore, the watch from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. is divided into 2 periods of 2 hours each, called dog watches. The bells in the first dog watch are struck in the usual order until 6 p.m., 4 bells. Then, 6:30, the first half hour of the second dog watch, is given 1 bell only, with 7 p.m. having 2 bells, 7:30 p.m. 3 bells, and 8 p.m. the usual 8 bells. The reason for this breaking of the sequence is that at the mutiny of the Nore, the signal for the crews of all the naval ships concerned to down their tools was the striking of 5 bells, originally 6:30 p.m. After the revolt had been quelled, Milords of the Admiralty had the bells changed to commemorate this major mutiny in the Royal Navy. Now, Hugel is partially correct. The Royal Navy did in fact stop striking 5 bells in the second dog watch after a series of mutinies aboard RN ships at the Nore anchorage in 1797. There is, however, a much more simple and reasonable explanation for the existence of dog watches. Here is Richard Henry Dana Jr. once again. The watch from 4 to 8 p.m. is divided into 2 half watches of 2 hours each, called dog watches. The object of this is to make an uneven number of watches, 7 instead of 6. Otherwise, the same watch would stand during the same hours for the whole voyage, and those who had 2 watches on deck the first night would have the same throughout the trip. But the uneven number shifts the watches. The dog watches coming about sundown or twilight, and between the end of the day's work and the setting of the night watch, are usually the time given for recreation, for smoking, telling yarns, etc. on the forecastle, things which are not allowed during the day. In other words, dog watches allow for the work shifts to be staggered, so that a sailor who stands the midnight watch one night, for example, will not have to stand it again the next. As to why these shortened watches are called dog watches, English humorist and civil servant Theodore Hook suggested that it was due to the fact that they are curtailed. And now, I'm afraid I must leave you, to puzzle out that bit of canine wordplay on your own.